Well, what is going on YouTube? Welcome back to A Therapeutic Edge. Today on the table, we have something very special to me. This is my second custom knife. This is the Jake Hoback A10. Now, this is 8 or 9 years old. His designs have come a long way since he designed this, but this one really speaks to me. It is one hell of a pocket knife. I only have two custom folders. I have the Gavco Mako Custom here, and now I have the Jake Hoback A10. Both of these are older designs, but absolute favorites of mine. I do have a couple of other customs. Those are fixed blades. I have these two Seven Hills designed fixed blades in 3V. This one I picked up at Blade Show East last year, and this one, the longer one, I had him make specifically for me. I may do another video on those a little bit down the road, but for now let's focus on what we're at here. This is also a stellar pocket knife. This thing belonged to Jimmy Slash, and he decided to move it along, and I took one look at it and said, oh, it's like it was made for me, and jumped on it, and I am super glad that I did. It is just a chunk of excellent pocket knife. It is all titanium. It is running on bearings. It is S90V with a very, very dark acid wash / stone wash on it that I just love. It is Tanto, and I'm okay with that. This thing is super slicey and very comfortable in hand. Customs are a funny thing. A lot of people chase them. I don't really. I like manufacture. I like knives made by big companies and by small makers through big companies. But actual sort of handmade custom knives kind of take you into a whole new arena. This one in particular, as I said, really spoke to me. Now, part of that, of course, is because it is an absolute perfect handful for me. The design is simple and yet beautiful. I just love this thing. And I wanted to share it with you. I hope you guys don't mind. This is not one that I'm going to suggest that you go out and buy, because you can't. You might find one on the secondary market. He made a larger one called the A15, and of course after that his customs and all of his knives really exploded. But this is a joy to have in the collection. So let's take a look at what you get. First thing I want to point out is the unique and interesting shape. As you may have noticed with the Mako, knives are traditionally have a little bit of a bend into the handle, but this thing, well, it is almost a boomerang in shape, and I love that. I didn't know what I was going to think. I had never held one before. But when it landed, the first thing I realized is that that shape allows you to get, particularly right here at the Tanto, and it is just perfectly designed. This thing cuts so well. Now, I've already actually had it out in my pocket for quite a, for a number of days. First thing I did was take it with me when I went out and worked in the yard on one of my properties that I sort of helped take care of. And let me tell you something. This S90V blade is incredibly slicey, and the design of this knife means that when you are doing things like, well, what did I do? I cut vines. I cut some other, plant matter and stuff with it. I cut up some cardboard. I cut some other bits and pieces around the yard. I didn't do any, steak baking with this. I didn't like whittle with it or anything. But I'm telling you, if I wanted to, the design is really just sort of elegantly executed for such a beast of a knife. It has jimping here, right where your thumb lands. Of course, my thumb overshoots a little bit because I have big hands, but if you're going to push, this jimping is just exactly the right spot. It has a little bit of jimping down here to catch your pinky, and the overall shape is very excellent in hand. I know I've said that a couple of times, but I'm going to say it again. The blade is ground very, very thin, comes to a very nice slicey edge, which I really enjoy. It's a fairly thick chunk of S90V. In fact, the whole knife is a bit of a chunk, but I love that. Now, I've had it apart, and these scales are milled like crazy on the inside. There's just a ton of millwork in here to try to reduce weight, because otherwise this thing, as big as it is, would weigh an absolute ton. I haven't weighed it yet. We're going to do that together here on the table. So what do you get when you get yourself a Custom A10? Well, if we line the blade up in a way that makes sense to measure, you get 1, 2, just at 3 inches of cutting on 3 1/4 inches of S90V. The handle length is 1, 2, 3, 4 full inches, which of course works beautifully for my big old meat hooks. The knife itself, from end to end, it's a weird measurement because of that curve, but it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, just at 8 inches long overall. I don't know. Well, let me put it this way. I don't really chase customs. A lot of people are really into them, and that's where they put their money and their effort. And I don't. It's not because I don't understand that they are marvelously engineered and beautifully designed. Now, don't get me wrong. Often you get much better fit and finish from big companies like We or Riot, but there's something sort of special about a handmade custom. It's the attention to detail, I think. It's the energy and effort that goes into it. It makes them stand out. Now this one, because of those bearings, is just, the action is superb. Well, it's just remarkable. I love this thing. Now, the screws in the back, there are 3 screws, one here. They go through the back spacer and screw directly into the titanium. Something you see fairly often on custom knives, which means that you want to be careful when you're taking it apart and putting it back together, because if you strip the threads on this side, you're done. So you want to be careful if you get something like this and take it apart. The pivot is not a D-shaped pivot. It is a round pivot with a single screw on this side, but the fitment is so good that when it compresses itself down into this ring on this side, I didn't have any trouble with the pivot spinning at all. It is just really well thought out. And as I mentioned, there is this deep, really deep milling on the inside. The stop pin, you may notice there is no visible stop pin. I'm not sure if you guys can see that. Is actually cut inside the blade in a U shape that runs right through here. So the knife is on not just the pivot, but it slides along on the stop pin on the inside as well. It is a really cool design. Every once in a while, in this weird hobby of mine, something comes along that just jumps out at me and makes me go, oh yeah, that's why I love knives. This is just one of those. Let's do some size comparisons. It is not an enormous knife, as I have mentioned. Here it is against the Spyderco PM2, and as you can see, the PM2 has a very similar handle length, a little bit more blade, but they are very similar in size. Here it is against the PM3. And depending on where you put these knives, because of the bend of the Hoback, it makes it look, I don't know, this knife's a trip. I love this kind of wild shape. It makes me smile. But know that it is comfortably between, in size, PM2 and the PM3. Let's put it up against a Benchmade Bug Out. Right? It is bigger than the Bug Out. Of course it is. Custom knives, again, are an interesting part of knife collecting. Most people won't get into them. With excellent factory knives being made at every possible end of the budget, from $25 or $30 Kershaws that'll last you a lifetime, up through $600 Hinderers that will equally last you a lifetime. Getting into custom knives is sort of an interesting step in the middle. When I said I don't chase them, what I mean is I don't have a custom maker that I'm hunting. I do have individual makers that really jump out and grab my attention. And those knives I do tend to chase, regardless if they're made in factory or in a shop, wherever those come from. But if you're going to collect knives, eventually, custom knives are going to sort of come into your focus. And if that happens, make sure that you know what you really like first. Right? My two customs could not be more different in aesthetic and design. And yet they both absolutely work for the kind of collection that I have. But my collection's like that. It's kind of all over the map. This is such a good knife. And as is this. I love this thing. Let's get some measurements out of the way. There is a little lock stick, as you can hear, which is interesting because it does have an insert. And that's interesting. A little bit of lock stick. Let's weigh it, because that's something we do. I'm going to guess it's going to come back even heavy, even with all of that milling. 6.7 ounces. You will definitely know this thing is in your pocket. For sure. But, you know, as I've mentioned many times, I like that. I prefer a knife that lets you know it's in the pocket. But that's just me. All right, let's go ahead and zero that out. All right, as I said, it is a thick chunk of S90V. It is 4.8, there we go, 4.8, yep, 4.8, just almost dead on millimeters of S90V. That is a nice thick chunk, but because it has this high flat grind and a fairly aggressive grind as well, it comes down to a very thin edge, which I think is just wonderful. The handle is no laughing matter. It is almost 15 millimeters, which is just over a ½ inch. There you go, you can see that. The blade itself is marked with 3 hand-done hash marks, which match on the inside of this scale 3 hand-done hash marks. My guess is that is how Jake Hoback kept track of which knives went with which scales as he was putting them together. I think that is super cool. I really do. So, what's the point? Well, the point is that I love to collect pocket knives, and I have a wide variety. You guys have seen a lot of them. I love everything from $25 budget Ganzos, I know, I do, to $600 and $700, Hinderers, and on. Chasing customs is another step that I likely won't jump into. I mean, let's face it, the average price of one of my knives is probably $100, $150. It really is. But every once in a while, something special comes along that says it would be worth my energy and effort to get one. I'm super glad I added this to the collection. I am very grateful to Jimmy Slash for making it possible. As this is such a wildly different design from most of Jake Hoback's other stuff, I don't know if I will go after more of his knives. I do know that his energy and thoughtfulness in putting this thing together tell me that if you want a Hoback knife, you're going to get a good knife. There is no question in my mind about that at all. This is just really well done. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. This has been the Jake Hoback A10 Custom. I have been a Therapeutic Edge. If you have any questions about this knife or any of my knives, feel free to ask down in the comments below. I'd love to have you here on a regular basis, so please subscribe. We'll see you next time.